Why, hello, just checking to make sure this thing is on. Hi. So yeah, this is a format change, and one that was kind of inspired by another YouTuber's most recent format change, that one being MovieBob's, but hopefully my take on an adjacent format will feature my own uniquities so it doesn't just feel like a one-to-one copy, because dear god, I hope that's not the fucking case. But regardless, a format change was something that I have been mulling over for some time, even before that, because I wanted to improve video quality, show a side of me that isn't as easily shown when just doing voiceover, and create videos that don't just focus on movies, TV, video games, or heavy metal. So hopefully that works. Also, by the way, my pronouns are she, her, because despite this very sexy, deep, feminine voice, I identify as a woman. Admittedly, I also identify as an asshole, but more importantly, I'm a woman. An asshole woman. I know many of you already knew that, but it's worth saying just because there's probably a few subscribers on my channel that have watched some content of mine that didn't revolve around LGBTQ stuff and only had my voice to really go off of when it came to perceiving my gender. Because, you know, those earlier videos only featured my aforementioned disembodied voice rather than these curvaceous accoutrements. So I just wanted to state my pronouns up front here so that none of you are misgendering me, or at least unintentionally misgendering me. I know some folks will intentionally label me as a man and as something that I'm uncomfortable as because, you know, this is YouTube and the algorithm rewards some of the worst people. May the content last forever. But those people kind of suck anyway, so fuck them. Anyway, that was that. Please enjoy this video on Alan Wake 2. Alan Wake 2 is a brick-shittingly scary game. In fact, this 2023 Remedy Entertainment horror sequel to the 2010 cult classic Alan Wake is a terrific title with a David Lynchian Twin Peaks-style Pacific Northwest setting, a creepy mystery, some quality action gameplay that's actually good, you know, unlike the first game. Sorry, you know it's true. A labyrinthine yet compelling narrative, a very dark sense of humor, a gameplay section that turns into a playable rock opera, which is important for obvious reasons. And then there's just the fact that, as I said at the start of this video, Alan Wake 2 is frightening. If anything, it's scarier than most games are, as well as the monster that stares at me from the toilet bowl with a certain intensity. In fact, Alan Wake 2 is just packed with a sense of tension. Its aforementioned small town and woodsy Pacific Northwest setting is creepy and foreboding. The way in which combat plays around with light and darkness is inspired. The enemies, while defeatable, can be very intimidating in terms of how they add new nuances and changes to the combat that forces the player to formulate various new stratagems in order to defeat them, especially the great and inventive boss battles. The lighting itself is excellent as journeying into the dark fills the player with dread, because, you know, when surrounded by the night, it always feels as if something else is lurking in the darkness, like a monster or a debt collector, or a monster that is also a debt collector. And then there's the fact that the game takes the player to various horrifying settings, the types of places that are present in other horror games, like haunted forests, abandoned theme parks, and a fucked up hospital, you know, the usual shit. Yet these scary locales are executed to such perfection that it's more than okay that Alan Wake 2 uses more than a few location-based horror game tropes. The game is just scary like that, even if it leans into some solid gold cheese and a quality sense of humor at times.
Yako, we're going to a cool guy's house to drink some brewskis. Are you coming? No, Ilmo. I'm very busy wearing a turtleneck and drinking wine. Like an asshole.
However, the most important aspect of Alan Wake 2's horror elements, at least in terms of today's episode, is in how the game mastered the concept of the video game jump scare, and does so arguably better than almost any mainstream horror game in recent memory. And yeah, I know that's a bold claim, and one that will take a little bit of background and explaining before we even get to talk about Alan Wake 2, but it's all kind of necessary to go over so that we can see the fulfillment of this video's thesis in all of its beautiful splendor, or something like that. I don't know what that means, I just work here. See, in most visual horror media, whether it be movies, TV shows, or video games, there are usually visual or audio surprises at the end of any given horror sequence. Like, think about a thriller, slasher, home invasion, or any other type of horror movie where a sequence builds up tension through a creepy setting, a lack of lighting that emphasizes darkness, eerie music, and such, all before a monster, demon, serial killer, alien, ghost, or Jack Nicholson pops into the scene in an unexpected way, akin to how a joke builds up to a punchline, and thus surprising and shocking the audience who were on the edge of their seat, sometimes eliciting audible loud noises. Because truly, a high-quality jump scare is the horror equivalent of a good cum shot. Speaking of which, I would like to talk to you about your penis's extended warranty. With that said though, movies and TV shows do have a certain advantage over video games when it comes to crafting high quality jump scares, mostly because a movie or TV show can navigate your focus, attention, and gaze much more easily than compared to a video game, which only makes sense. After all, video games are an interactive medium, and one where if something popped out to scare you in a horror game, it is very possible you might actually miss it, because despite best laid developer intentions, you might be looking at the ground for collectibles or ammo or cats or skulls to fuck or something right before you hear that game's eerie musical score crescendo in a way that signifies a jump scare that just occurred. One that you fucking missed. Ignore the titty goblin at your own peril. And the tricky nature of jump scares in video games is something that I've been cognizant of for over a decade. In fact, when Yahtzee Croshaw of Zero Punctuation fame did a video on one of the earlier Fear games and desired for the game's creepy girl antagonist to come back because he missed the scary, that is something that stuck with me. How unlike movies or TV shows, the interactive nature of video games can inhibit attempts to place a focus on a jump scare because, let's be honest here, gamers can be distracted by almost fucking anything in a game, even those without neurodivergencies, which admittedly does not include me, because my brain is not normal. Sure, some video games know how to place an emphasis on scary shit that makes the player have to pay attention to the monster in front of their faces, who also just so happens to want to nom their face out of existence. See House Beneviento in Resident Evil Village if you want a lesson in how to be scared in a claustrophobic space that'll make you cry like a little girl. And that was me. I was the little girl in this fucking scenario. I really was not proud of the sounds that came out of my mouth when I was playing that section of the game. I even lost respect for myself. What little I had. But with that said, the art of the video game jump scare is just elusive in many other titles. Hell, even in many good games like Dead Space. Because even though many horror titles have a thrilling sense of tension throughout via terrific lighting, creepy monsters, a haunting score, and such, a lot of the jump scares can be missed, like in the earlier mentioned Fear games, and then there's the fact that some of those said jump scares in, say, Dead Space were predictable, like in Dead Space, or at least the first little while of Dead Space, because, you know, the game gradually becomes more inventive in the ways that it tries to get underneath the player's skin as it goes on. There's only so many times a supposedly dead body transforms into a multi-limbed alien necromorph monstrosity before you start to realize what the shtick is. Because fuck me once, shame on you. Fuck me twice, fuck you too! Oh my god, that's what I looked like as a teenager. But anyway, the point. The video game jump scare can be difficult for developers to nail. It's just something that takes more effort to execute than in movies or TV shows because, as stated earlier, those mediums can point the camera and make the audience focus on whatever the filmmakers intended, but games, on the other hand, can have an air of unpredictability in them due to the interactive element inherent to them, meaning that developers have to find a different way to draw the player's attention when they want that said player to look at something scary, just like my dental records. And Alan Wake 2, to bring this essay back full circle, has some of the best jump scares of any AAA horror video game in recent memory. In fact, the game uses a lot of the earlier mentioned suspense-building creepy environmental ambience in a way that ferments tension and unease within the player, all before surprising that said player with an absolute dick punch of a jump scare that frightens them to the point that they might question their belief of divine providence, because something created created these horrifying images and sequences, and it was not God. And the game does this by playing around with the player's sense of focus. The creepy ambience of the environments, music, lighting, and such just draw the player into the game's action and sense of tension. We become hyper-focused on what is happening in the game to the point that when a jump scare occurs, we the player are caught off guard. And this works because visual and auditory jump scares often happen in either claustrophobic environments, or the game causes the player to feel such a sense of off-kilter unease through the earlier established suspense buildup, all to the point that we the player don't even want to look for ammo or other things because we feel like we are in danger, which is only logical. After all, no one wants to scrounge around for collectibles and such when they are in imminent danger of becoming some unholy abomination's new fleshy plaything. You know, the type that will tear our bodies apart limb from limb and thus causing our funerals to be a closed casket affair. Maybe they'll need my dental records after all. Hell, some of Alan Wake 2's jump scares are so inspired that they don't even involve enemies at all. In fact, I just constantly remember a sense of foreboding at times when in a scary environment all by itself, and then being startled by basically anything. And on that front, the abandoned theme park section was especially notable, mostly because that section of the game takes place at night, is poorly lit by design, and features intermittent encounters with creepy enemies, thus causing me and other players by extension to be extremely engaged with what's happening on screen. Because let's be clear here, nearly everything about that section of Alan Wake 2 is creepy, and anytime something unexpected occurred, I may have squealed like a little piglet. If anything, I even got by a jump scare that was just background audio, because after 30 minutes worth of exploring this creepy as fuck amusement park, I was not prepared to hear a deep, creepy carnival voice.
Jesus! Calm down, Saga.
This might sound really silly, but that really got to me, because after wandering around this creepy, loud, and poorly lit amusement park, and even fighting a few inhuman monsters, I was not prepared for that type of scare from what sounds like an evil clown, because even though that was not an actual enemy and just was background noise from the game's environment, I essentially dropped my controller, shriek, raise my fist, and yell, "You're gonna die, clown!" However, Alan Wake 2's mastery of the jump scare goes even deeper than those earlier mentioned examples. If anything, the game gets downright bizarre in the best way and makes the player feel as if they were on too much LSD, by which I mean the drug and not the big-ass street in Chicago. See, there are places in the game's world called overlaps. These are places where the real world and the game's alternate dimension called the Dark Place kind of blur together and meet, thus why it's referred to as an overlap. And these areas can be downright bananas. After all, the Dark Place doesn't play by the rules of reality. Like walking through a door doesn't necessarily mean that you are physically going to be on the other side of that said door. Certain places loop to where exiting an area means going back to that start of that pre-existing area. A lot of the visuals overlay each other in a way that creates an otherworldly experience. The reality of the Dark Place can be changed through narrative means, and the existence of light can also alter the Dark Place by illuminating new pathways forward where dead ends had only existed prior. Because light bulbs, they're fucking magic. And overlaps operate in the same capacity. They don't play by the rules of reality or object permanence. Instead, they function on dream logic, which is eerie and creepy because that's really damn unpredictable. Mostly because the experiences within an overlap don't obey the laws of physics, real observable reality, or common courtesy, meaning that everything within an overlap is just unexpected. Like the baby in that one wholesome cinematic experience called Eraserhead, which causes an absolute shit ton of tension within the player, even before the fact that overlaps generally always contain tough boss battles involving some really skeevy villain characters that have been built up beforehand at the end of them, meaning that when experiencing the absolute psychedelic horror show extravaganza that an overlap contains, there's also a feeling of dread that accompanies that terrifying journey, which is something that makes the player especially susceptible to jump scares. Jump scares that are essentially some of the best that I have seen or experienced in a video game in recent memory. Many of which are due to how the game inserts haunting, visually disturbing images, often accompanied by loud, disruptive sounds and some flashing lights that take up the entirety of the player's screen in order to deliver an epic anal drip of a jump scare, which is just genius. Because remember, One of the flaws involving jump scares in other horror video game titles is that it's possible for the player to miss them, to be distracted by the game's environments and such, much like how this big chungus of a microphone might distract the viewer with its impressive girth. But with these types of jump scares, courtesy of the overlap sequences inside Alan Wake 2, the player can't be distracted from them or miss them, given that the game takes control away from the player in order to display something disturbing on that said player's whole screen. There's just no missing these jump scares, and that's amazing, especially because the game's earlier mentioned suspense building already has the player really focus on what's physically going on in the game, which then causes these types of jump scares to have an even greater impact. And that shit just makes for a very thrilling horror game experience. I mean, speaking for myself, Alan Wake 2's overlap sequences had me at the edge of my seat. Like, I was really sweating, kind of as if I was on that acclaimed interview show with the hot wings, the hot celebrities, and Mr. Hot Sauce Man. The game is just really intense like that. Furthermore, these types of jump scares in Alan Wake 2, where the video game stages a coup to overthrow our TV screens, can happen outside of overlaps too, meaning that the game could have lulled the player into a sense of complacency and safety all before executing a really effective jump scare. Kind of like if some stupid rabbit and his 580 kids were frolicking besides a bunch of singing flowers on a beautiful sunny Midwest day, blissfully unaware that Elmer Fudd was about to forever fuck up their lives. These jump scares were impactful in their efficacy to the point that they were unpredictable and often felt random. Well, they weren't random. These frights were meticulously set like that Italian gymnast wheel of Parmesan cheese on a classic trap, one that captures either rodents or people from Wisconsin. They were just well placed to scare the shit out of your bowels. God, quick aside, there are a lot of scatological jokes in this episode. Someone speak to the long dead spirit of Jonathan Swift, there'd be a lot of dookie in today's video. Did you like that Jonathan Swift reference? That was for the large amount of you who read books from the early 1700s. In other words, this style of jump scare outside of the overlap sequences in Alan Wake 2 were, as I said, unpredictable to the point of feeling random.
I ate a man alive tonight.
In conclusion, Alan Wake 2 is a very good horror title and one that has perfected the art of the video game jump scare. Whether we are talking about all the ways that the title ups the tension, stitches its jump scares inside the experience with surgical precision, or in how some of the game's best jump scares take over the whole TV screen, or monitor if you're one of those, let me see, PC gamers, and are thus unmissable, Alan Wake 2 is a master of its horrifying craft. If anything, its thrills and chills are impressive and stand apart from a lot of modern AAA horror experiences, with terrifying moments that shake the player to their very core, overall delivering a game with scares that are as frightening as they are shocking. They're unpredictable.